Hello, I'm Lee Vishloff, a professional engineer. I'm with Technos Services Inc., a technology consulting firm in the high-tech product development area. Tech projects fail for simple reasons, and today we'll talk about one of those, multiple critical paths. The brief outline: most of us are actually pretty good at things, and why is that a problem? How probabilities stack up against us, and then a brief conclusion. So we're good at things. You did well in university, your boss tells you to do something or asks you to do something, and you do it in the time that you quoted them. It works. You have a good success rate, and maybe the rest of your team also has a good success rate. You're quite happy to work with them, and they're hitting 80 or 90%, which would just be awesomely good. And yet it's not enough, and all teams struggle with timeliness in technology development, and some of it is to do with the fact that we can't really predict the future, and we're not smart enough to see every technical detail that could be there. But there's a simpler one as well, and that just has to do with compounding probabilities. If you go down your critical path and you have to hit, let's say, 10 tasks in a row, and in a big project you're going to be doing a lot more than that, and you hit them 90% of the time, your chances of success at the end of being right on time is about a third. So we pretty well guarantee failure if we don't watch the compounding probabilities and put enough slack in our system, or have too many ways to get to the end, too many critical paths. So this compounding probability can occur in a few places. Critical path, of course, which I just mentioned. Your probability of your project success is basically the multiplication of your success through any given path, assuming that they're independent variables, and of course they're not. They're usually conditional probabilities, so your actual number will be a little bit different, but the concept holds. Multiple technical decisions, of course, in a project, if you're making a product, everything pretty well has to work. I mean, you have some software bugs, but almost every decision you make has to be one that in the end of the day works and adds value to your product. And of course we know this is exceedingly difficult, because even simple projects involve making hundreds if not thousands of decisions, and that's why we iterate, and we either use iterative development strategies or we use sort of the traditional waterfall with iteration 1, iteration 2 type of stuff. Now, third place where compounding probabilities hit us is in staff reassignment, and putting in inadequate slack between projects. If you're running project 3 and project 1 and project 2 both have staff that are required for your project, and there's any doubt that those personnel are going to be available in a timely manner, now your success is dependent on their success. And this domino effect is very common within large companies that have multiple projects ongoing. So this multiple critical path problem, it can sneak up on you. Every time you add a path, it reduces your probability of success, so we need to try hard to keep one. And it's easy for me to sit here at my computer and say that. It's actually very hard to do. The commercial pressures are always there, you're resource constrained, and there's always the need to do more. Your staff maybe have to be pulled off a little bit to help somebody with a support problem on a previous project, or more likely the salesmen come in and say, everybody's got super anti-gravity scheduled for next quarter, and you weren't planning on doing it for another 3 or 4 quarters, and so then you have to shoehorn new tasks into your project because you're adding a new feature to your system, and things go wrong on somebody's task, and so you'll assign another person to assist them because they have slack. And so what happens is you consume their slack and then create other critical paths in your network. And this is a very common thing, because the common way of thinking about project planning, or one of the ways of thinking about it, is management, is that you want to say, well, I'm going to focus on the important things, and the important things are the things on my critical paths. If you only do that, then what happens is your small things become big things. So here's a simple example of expanding criticality in a program plan. So we have a basic little plan here. It's got 15 line items. You got task 2 and 3, and 13 and 15 are your critical path, and then we have a couple of other designers busy working away on tasks. I guess that's 5, 6, 7, and then 9 through 14, and there's slack in there for those other two paths through your system. So we have slack, and life looks pretty good, and we'll assign a probability of success of n, where n is less than 1. Well, what happens is that the designer working on task 2 runs into some trouble, and the boss goes, wow, this is no good. We can't start off with this trouble right away. So he takes a person who has just completed task 9 and says, go help the guy on task 2. You've got slack on your next task. So he does that, and they work really hard, and they just managed to hold that date. But what's happened is that you've now created 4 new critical tasks. Line items 10 through 14 weren't on the critical path, or 10 through 13 and 15 weren't on the critical path before, and now they are. And so we've basically created 2 threads that both are critical in our system. And of course, in a big project, you have many of these going on all the time. And what happens is that as the criticality of your plan increases, your chances of success go down and down and down, and eventually something does slip, and then it becomes a major rework. So in conclusion, work hard to keep things to a single path, and don't just manage your critical items, but actually manage the little items to keep them off the critical path. And if you do that, you're going to improve your chances of success. If you find you've got too many critical paths through your project, I picked the number 3, but it could be much bigger, or you might even just say, no, I'm only going to have 1. It's time to recast your plan, because it becomes more and more difficult to be sure you're going to hit your numbers the more of these you've got through your plan. So just be aware of the concept. Keep the small items off the critical path, so that the technical people can address what's currently the critical item, and if you as the project manager can focus on clearing everything else away that maybe can be done with some lesser skilled or outside staff, then you're going to increase your chances of bringing in your project on time.